Yorkshire, England, June 1995. Hollowmoor was a hotel tucked away among the damp hills of Yorkshire, cloaked in mist nearly all year round. A Victorian mansion with walls tangled in ivy, windows that looked like sunken eyes, and a silence that didn't match the life that once pulsed inside. In the summer of 1995, Henry and Margaret decided to escape the frantic rhythm of London and chose, among many, that picturesque hotel for a romantic weekend. The brochure promised peace, vintage charm, and a breathtaking view. But some things are never printed in brochures. Suite 113, the only one on the third floor of the Old East Wing, was known by the oldest staff as the Forgotten One. Always empty, rarely offered to guests. Most didn't even know it existed. On the night the couple arrived, a heavy storm brewed on the horizon. The manager hesitated before handing over the key, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. He only smiled oddly and said, "Enjoy your stay, and if you hear anything, don't worry. The hotel is old." When the door to Suite 113 closed behind them, time seemed to bend. The air was thick, and the silence wasn't silence. It was something hiding inside it. They didn't know, but Suite 113 would never let them leave the same way they entered. The rain lashed against the tall windows of Suite 113, a steady rhythm that echoed through the room like a heartbeat too loud for comfort. Henry stood by the fireplace, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands, though he would have denied the tremble if Margaret asked. She was in the bathroom, brushing her hair in front of the mirror, but the moment the comb reached the nape of her neck, she froze, cold. Not just a chill, something sharp and invisible grazed her skin. She turned, fast. Nothing. The bathroom lights flickered once, then again, then off. "Henry?" she called. No answer. The bedroom was darker than before. The fire hadn't gone out, but its glow seemed strangled. "Henry, did you turn off the lights?" He stepped into the bathroom doorway, frowning. No, power must be shaky in this place. But he hadn't heard the lights go. No click, no hum, just gone. Margaret looked at the mirror. Her reflection blinked half a second too late. She stared, not moving. Her heart raced. "Henry," she whispered, "come look at this." He joined her, annoyed, but when he looked into the glass, they both felt it. Something was off. Their reflections stared back, but there was something in the corner behind them. A blur, a figure, a woman, thin, with wet hair plastered to her face. Henry spun around. No one. The mirror still showed her. Then the sound. A faint knock, not on the door, but inside the walls. 3 knocks, and a breath, like someone exhaling in Margaret's ear. She screamed and ran into the bedroom. Henry followed, but the room had changed. The wallpaper was curling from the walls like peeling skin. The bedposts had deep claw-like scratches that hadn't been there an hour ago. And the painting above the bed, a pastoral scene of Yorkshire hills, was now drenched in red hues, as if the paint had melted into blood. The doorknob jiggled, not from their side. Margaret ran to it, twisted the knob, locked, but they hadn't locked it. Then came the whisper, soft and raspy, spoken by no voice they recognized. "No one ever leaves. Not whole." Henry grabbed the phone. Dead. The lights flickered again, and when they returned, even dimmer than before, the mirror from the bathroom was no longer reflecting the room. It showed the hallway, and someone walking slowly toward their door. The mirror was still showing the hallway, but whoever had been walking toward the door was now gone. Henry stepped back, heart pounding. "We're leaving," he said. He grabbed the suitcase, yanked the door open. But it wasn't the hallway outside. It was brick, A solid, ancient brick wall where the hallway should have been, cold and damp as if it had been there for 100 years. "What the hell is this?" Margaret gasped. Henry slammed the door shut and opened it again. Now it was a hallway, but not the same one. Faded wallpaper, no lights, doors lining both sides, some hanging off their hinges. A soft wailing coming from far down the corridor, like a child crying through a pillow. "We're not in the hotel anymore," Margaret whispered. "Yes, we are," said a voice. "Not Henry's." They both turned. There, sitting calmly in the corner of their suite, was a woman in an old-fashioned maid's uniform. She had sunken eyes, pale skin, and a stitched smile like a porcelain doll. She hadn't been there seconds ago. Margaret screamed. Henry reached for the lamp to throw at her, but when he turned back, the woman was gone. In her place, a pile of neatly folded linens, soaked in something dark and still dripping. The wailing got louder. Henry stepped into the hallway. Margaret grabbed his arm. "Don't! Please don't!" But something was pulling him forward, not physically, but deeper. In his bones, like the floor itself, leaned toward the noise. As they walked down the corridor, every door they passed bled a different sound. Scratching, crying, distant music. One door thudded rhythmically, as if something inside pounded its head against the wall. Suite 117 was open. Inside, a room frozen in another time. Dustless, warm. A man and woman sitting at the table, staring into nothing, until they both turned in perfect unison toward the doorway. They had no eyes, just deep black holes where eyes should be. Margaret pulled Henry back. "We need to go. This place, it's not real." "Oh, but it is," said the maid's voice again, this time from the ceiling above them. They looked up. She was crawling across the ceiling like an insect, her limbs bent backward, her mouth stretching open. Slam. The hallway door behind them shut. Then the lights went out. Total blackness. Henry reached for Margaret's hand, but what he grabbed wasn't her hand. It was cold, wet, and it held on tight. The grip tightened around Henry's hand. He yanked free and stumbled backward into Margaret, who screamed as they fell against the wall. Still total darkness, except for a dim, flickering light coming from underneath one of the doors ahead. Suite 113. Theirs. But they had just left it. "Wasn't it behind us?" Margaret whispered. The number on the door glowed faintly, as if freshly carved into rotting wood. The hallway had somehow looped, or maybe it never moved at all. The couple stood frozen, their backs to the wall, listening. From inside Suite 113, voices, multiple, arguing, a crying, laughing. Henry crept forward and placed his ear to the door. Silence. Then, slam, slam, slam. 3 thunderous bangs from the other side sent him staggering back. The doorknob began to rattle. Something was trying to open it from the inside. "No more games," Margaret hissed. "We're finding another way out." They ran. Doors blurred on either side as they passed, each one slamming shut on its own as they approached. At the end of the corridor, an old elevator stood with its doors cracked open. Inside, a flickering light and what looked like a mirror, the same mirror from their suite, but now it was cracked, and behind its reflection stood the maid smiling. As they approached the elevator, the light inside exploded with a loud pop, plunging them into darkness again. Henry pushed the elevator button. Nothing. He pressed again. The elevator doors slid fully open, but it wasn't the elevator inside. It was Suite 113 again, exactly as they left it. The suitcase on the bed, the mirror now shattered completely, and on the wall, written in what looked like smeared blood, "Checked in, never checked out." Margaret backed away, but something slithered past her foot, like a hand retreating under the carpet. The radio came on. Static. Then a voice. A man's voice. Calm, deep, echoing through the room like it was inside their heads. They never buried me. They left me in the walls. And now, I'm part of this place. Suddenly the closet door swung open. Inside, a crawl space, dark, narrow, breathing. Margaret screamed as pale, eyeless faces began to peer out from the shadows inside, silent, expressionless, watching. Henry grabbed her arm and turned to run. The hallway was gone. Just bricks, no windows, no exit. Only the whisper of the maid, circling the room from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You're home now." And then the lights went out again, darkness again. Only the sound of their breathing filled the suffocating room, rapid, ragged, echoing like it didn't belong to them anymore. Henry held Margaret close, his ears straining for any hint of movement. But the silence wasn't comforting. It felt intentional, like something was listening. He reached for his phone. Dead. Her watch. Stuck. 3:13 a.m. Again. And again. And again. No matter how many times they checked, the time wouldn't change. Trapped in an endless minute. "I think we're not alone," Margaret whispered. From behind the wall, scratching, not the light scurrying of rats. This was slow, deliberate, human fingernails dragged across plaster. Henry took a deep breath, grabbed the broken lamp from the nightstand, and smashed it against the wall. Hollow. He began tearing at the wallpaper, exposing rotted wood and cracked bricks behind it. Then, a hole. Inside, bones. Human bones. Hundreds crammed together in a narrow vertical shaft. Fingers still reaching upward. Some wore fragments of 1930s uniforms. Some still had rings. One had a child's locket around its neck, swinging slightly, as if just disturbed. Margaret gagged and turned away. On the floor, a piece of cloth. She picked it up, a faded uniform patch, Hollowmoor Hotel staff. And beneath it something worse, a journal. Old, stained, pages torn. She opened it. June 3rd, 1933. We sealed the last of them behind the wall. Mr. Holloway said it was mercy, but they screamed. They didn't stop. They begged. June 5th. One of them still speaks to me at night. A maid, says her name is Elsie. She says I'll never leave. Margaret dropped the journal. "That name," she whispered. "Elsie." Henry nodded slowly. "The maid?" The radio clicked on again, just static. Then a child's voice, clear as day. "She fed us lies, locked us in, buried us while we breathed. Now it's your turn." The air turned ice cold. Footsteps in the walls. 1, 2, 3, then dozens. Running, charging, slamming against the room from all sides like the walls themselves were alive. The mirror burst into shards. The floorboards creaked and groaned. The closet swung open again. The crawl space was deeper now, moving, breathing, calling. Henry and Margaret backed into the corner as black mold began spreading rapidly across the floor toward them, pulsating like veins in a heart. Then dead silence again, and a knock at the door. 3 knocks, the exact rhythm from the journal. They didn't open it. The door opened by itself. And standing in the hallway, a bellhop, face half missing, eyes black and bleeding, and in his outstretched hand, 2 keys, suite 114 and 115. "Check-in's not over," he rasped. The storm outside had intensified, lightning slashing the sky as if trying to warn them. Margaret stood frozen, her hands trembling over the floorboard she had just uncovered. Beneath it, more than dust and time waited. There was a metal ring embedded in the wood, a hatch door sealed shut with rusted bolts.
"Henry, what is this?"
Her voice was barely above a whisper. Henry knelt beside her, inspecting the strange hatch. There was something etched into the old wood, almost burned in. It read, "Don't let it out." Without thinking, Henry pulled the ring. With a reluctant creak, the hatch opened, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. A cold breath of air escaped from the gap, sharp, metallic, and foul, like something long dead had exhaled. "We're not going down there," Margaret whispered, backing away. But the decision was no longer theirs. The lights in the suite went out. Then came the dragging sounds, slow, deliberate, circling them from within the walls. A whisper, faint but clear, slithered through the silence. "You opened it. Now you must see." The staircase below began to glow with a sickly blue light. Against their better judgment, drawn by something neither of them could explain, they began to descend. Each step echoed louder than the last, as if they were being followed or watched. The air grew colder. The walls were covered in symbols, carved faces, all screaming in silence, their mouths open in terror. As they reached the bottom, they found themselves in what could only be described as a ritual chamber. In the center, a pool of black liquid, chains, old bones, and something moving beneath the surface. A woman's voice echoed from the darkness, not Margaret's, soft, melancholic, almost grateful. "You've come back, I've waited so long." Then the pool began to ripple. Henry instinctively stepped in front of Margaret as the pool continued to ripple. The black liquid moved unnaturally, as though something underneath was trying to push through. That soft, eerie voice spoke again, closer now and more urgent. "Don't leave me alone again, please." Margaret turned to Henry, her eyes wide with dread. "That voice, Jacob, it's inside my head." The pool erupted. A hand shot out, skeletal, soaked in the black ichor, followed by the twisted figure of a woman. Her eyes were white voids, her mouth stretched in an eternal scream. Her dress was that of another century, waterlogged and clinging to bone and rot. Margaret screamed, backing away. Henry grabbed her, pulling her toward the stairs. But as they turned to run, the chamber changed. There was no staircase, no hatch, only stone. And the walls began to move, closing, breathing, whispering. Faces formed in the stone, mouths opening, repeating the same phrase in unison. "You broke the seal, now she walks." The woman, whatever she was, floated above the black pool now, her limbs twisting with impossible angles, her voice no longer soft but shrieking, distorted, inhuman. Henry tried to scream as the entity surged forward, her hand passing through his chest without resistance. He gasped. Time stopped. Margaret watched in paralyzed terror as Henry's eyes turned glassy. He fell to the ground, unmoving. "Henry!" she cried, falling to his side, but it was too late. Then the whispers surrounded her, louder and louder, until her mind was drowning in them. "Stay, stay, stay." With her last ounce of strength, Margaret bolted toward where the hatch once was. Her fingers scraped at the stone floor. Nothing. She was trapped. But then, a voice. Real. Human. Miss, are you all right?" She looked up, light pouring in. A man in a maintenance uniform stood above her. The hatch was open again, the chamber gone, the suite normal. Henry was gone. Only Margaret remained, curled on the floor of Suite 113, her hands covered in soot and dust. The maintenance man helped her up. "You must have had a bad dream, love. But how'd you get into that room? It's been sealed off since '73. Margaret couldn't speak. Her eyes drifted to the window. There, reflected in the glass behind her, was the woman in black, watching, smiling.